Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. Happy April. Hope everyone's having a great day so far, having a great week. Um, as always, I'm Sean, and we're glad to have you today. We've got a great lineup of content, a bunch of different things going on. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about some map layers, which is a new feature that was released in 2020.4. Jay and Lucas are going to take that over, and we're going to show you how to use it natively with maps. And then we're going to show you how you can hack map layers to build anything you want. So that should be a good presentation of things to come. And then next we've got Jeff James, who's going to talk about webhooks and talk about some of the more technical side of Tableau Server. But hopefully you'll be able to keep tabs on your Tableau server. And then lastly, I'm going to finish up with a quick walkthrough of a Workout Wednesday challenge. So really looking forward to that as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Jay and Lucas.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. I think I can see my screen through your screen. I apologize to everybody on the call. We had some technical difficulties here, so we're sharing through some middlemans here. So that's why the screen is a little smaller than I would wish. So quick introduction. My name is Lucas. I co-lead the KC user group with Sean, Jay, and Aaron. As Sean was saying, today we're going to cover map layers and its new feature that came out with version 2020.4. I think it's one of the ones I've been most excited about just to use right after they came out with dynamic parameters, just because of the limitations of maps and how that worked prior. So there's a lot to unpack. As a native feature, that it already gives you a lot, but just looking at out in the community online, seeing some crazy examples and ideas of how people are hacking this thing around just makes it even more powerful. And I think Jay is going to cover some of that after I give kind of the basics here. So I'm a senior BI developer with Ericsson today. Been messing with Tableau for a good chunk of years. Don't really have a Twitter account to post a lot of BI related things, but I'm starting to write up some content, and we'll start to make that available through my LinkedIn account if you're ever curious to see more of that. So with all that said, let's jump in. So before version 2020.4, how did we create a map and what were the limitations? So I have this data set here of retail transactions. If I wanted to plot states on a map, I would just double click on state. We get the map automatically. I'll change it to a filled map, for example, just for formatting. Wash out the layers. So I just get the South region and color it by order amount, for example. So with this, I can tell that Florida has been the state in the South leading with orders. Nothing groundbreaking here. Very simple stuff that we've probably all done at some point in time. So let me just format this a little bit better here. I'll do this, 5 steps. And here we have our little southern region map. So in order to add a second layer, let's say I want to see how the cities are contributing towards the orders, I would have to create a dual axis by bringing one of these geo elements onto the screen again, right click on it, do dual axes. One is on top of the other now, but then I have a second card that I can just bring in the location city, and now I have a bunch of circles. I don't want them colored. I want them to be a circle, and I'll mess with it a little bit more here, use order amount onto size, and mess with the colors, give it a border. So there we go. We have a dual axes map with 2 layers. And unfortunately, that's kind of where things would stop unless you went through some crazy workarounds or your data was shaped in such a way that you could add additional information. Let's say I wanted to add an additional layer here to show where the headquarters would be for this given store. Again, as long as your shape, if your data wasn't shaped to do so, it was very hard to do because you just can't bring in another map and do a triple layer, if you will. So that's kind of the before 2020.4. So how does that work today if you haven't used the feature yet? So the basics of creating a map is exactly the same. I'm going to pick, sorry, wrong data source. Let me gut this here and jump onto call center. By the way, this data set that I'm using is part of the real world fake data exercise or feature. Basically, you have the option to use real world data, but of course faked out so that you can use relative or relevant pieces of information from a certain industry. So I'll share the link here after my presentation if anybody is exploring for a data set to play with. So in this case, I have a call center related information. I'm going to plot the state, do the same thing. So far, you'll notice there's absolutely no difference compared to what we've done so far. But this time, I'm going to color this by the sentiment score. So what this is doing or saying here for me is it's rating the caller sentiment after they've contacted the call center, whether it is for a service to report the service outage, to make a payment, or with billing questions. So the happier they are, the better we're doing managing that call center. So here we have our first layer. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately actually, I don't need to create a second longitude here and do a dual axis anymore. If I want to bring in city onto this view, before I do that, let me just change the palette here so it's a little bit more obvious. So I'm going to pick, let's say, D83A4B. Make something stand out a little bit more on what's good and what's bad. There we go. Do 6 steps to remove the gray. And here I can tell that Wyoming, Nebraska, and Maine, those callers are not necessarily very happy when they reach out to the call center. Now, I understand the state has no relation with a call center. This is just to show functionality, not to necessarily tell a story. So how do I bring in city and see how the cities contributed to that, just similar to what we've done with 2020.4 or to the previous chart. So I'll just drag in city. And this time, instead of creating the dual axes, by just bringing it onto your panel, you'll see an add a marks layer option on the top left corner that once you release it, you'll start seeing those elements in there. So no dual axes, just simple as that. We bring in state again so that I can have all of my cities. I am going to pick that same color element, put it in on color here, change this to a circle and give it a border. Did it not take my city, state? Oh, it's my average sentiment score, my bad. There we go. So now we have the same behavior we just had on the previous tab. Nothing new, just easier or simpler to get to this result. But what's nice about this now is that we're no longer confined to just these 2 layers. So I have another field here, which is my call center location, that I can just bring onto the view as another layer. It's going to display it here on the map for me. You still can't see it. I'm going to hide some of the nulls associated with it. Bring in state and city. Make this detail as well. Change this to a shape. And I'm going to pick a certain shape that I had predetermined for it. And I'll make it a little bit larger. And then you'll start to see those call centers pop up on the screen in the middle of all of the other points that I had. So here we go, 3 layers. As far as I am aware, there's no limit on how many layers you can bring. The only thing to keep in mind, and if someone else on the call does know about a limit, please feel free to correct me. But just remember, the more layers you add to a map, you're bringing in more marks, and the more marks you have into Tableau, you might start seeing performance degradation. So just keep that in mind. Don't go completely overboard and crazy when you're doing this if you can. Just a few more features on this new functionality. You can, by hovering over the icon on the marks card, you have the option to make your layer visible or not. So here I just made my base layer invisible, toggle that on and off. You can, of course, rename a layer. You can move it up or down compared to the order here. But one really interesting one is just disabling it altogether. So here in Montana, for example, if I were to click on this element, I can no longer see my cities. One way to go around that would simply be to disable the selection on state. And now I can no longer, oops, double click. I can no longer click on that area. I still have the options for the cities, but I'm not able to click on that layer itself. So those are the basic components that you can do with this new functionality. Like I started saying, this introduced a lot of additional hacking opportunities or things that you could do in addition to a map. Jay is going to cover a lot of it here in just very shortly, but I wanted to show how you leverage the make point function in order to create additional layers for your chart, which happens to be a map here in my case. So let's say I wanted to put a label down here on the map. I have a column called reasons. I'm going to filter this out so you can see what those reasons are. So as I said before, folks call for billing questions, payments, to make a payment, or to report an outage. So let's say I wanted to display the keyword here, service outage, on the bottom corner of my map. One way would be to bring this map onto a dashboard, create a text element, float it over, or just use containers to place it strategically where you need it to, or play with backgrounds and things like that. With map layers, you can actually make it display directly on the map, unrelated to any of these data points that you already show. So if I want to display it here, first thing I need to know are the coordinates, the Latin long coordinates of the map. You could either look it up online, but a tip that I have is you could go to the right click on the screen where you want it, go to annotate, pick point, and then in here, you just insert the lat that has been generated by the view and the longitude. And by doing that, you know exactly where that is. So latitude of 27 and then negative 122 for your longitude. And now we can create a make point function. Let me delete this, and I'll try to make this a little bit larger since I'm not on full screen. So make point will take two arguments, the lat and long values. I'm going to round this to 27 and negative 122. I'm just going to call this my outage text. Once I hit OK, you'll see I have another geo element now here to use. I'll drag it onto the view, release it, and it created that little dot for me in the middle of the Pacific Ocean there. It's a new card altogether. It's set to automatic because we're using a map here. If I remove the automatic and go to text, I should get an ABC, which now allows me to display any type of text I want in here. And for this example, I'm just going to bring in, let's say, number of records. I don't really want this. I just want text to be enabled for me to write something in it. So I can come in here. Sorry, my things are popping up on different screens. And I can just type in my service outage text that I had planned for. Make it a little bit bigger. Now I can remove my placeholder. And there's a little gray background associated to it that we can remove by just taking some of the transparency out of it. So as you can see now, it's an additional layer to the map. We're up to 4 now, and it's completely unrelated necessarily to this chart. And you can see it's clickable as well, which we can disable through the layer. And then the last piece I wanted to cover today in building this through this functionality is just how we could leverage an additional chart within this mapping visual that I'm building. So if I wanted to see the progression of our service outages or how we're performing over the period of 30 days in October, for which I have data here, we could create another layer for that. So this data set only covers October. I can just create a new field, another make point function. but this time I want it to be related to actual data pieces and not just floating out of nowhere there on my chart. So I'm going to use my sentiment score. I've used the level of detail, and I'll explain later why that was the case. And for my longitude, I'm going to use a datepart function to return just the day of my call timestamp. So on the right-hand side here, missing one bracket, there we go. On here, that first argument for the latitude, the scores are from 0 to 5. Either you're extremely unhappy with the call or you're extremely happy, which gives you a 5. So my range of scores here go from 0 to 5. On the right-hand side, I'm returning the day from when the call happened. I only have dates for October, so I only have 30 or 31 possible values that this right-hand side here returns. I'm going to just leave it as calculation 1, drag it onto the view as a new layer, and you should see that it just plotted all of those points that I have in the middle of the ocean there, somewhere close to the coast of Africa, I would say, or even as further out as Australia. The reason that's happening is because I have not defined where on my Latin long it should necessarily appear. It's actually being data driven, and that's where normalizing the data becomes really important. I think Jay's going to cover that a little bit further on his piece of the presentation. So I won't touch on that too much, but it's just important for you to know how to place things where you intend them to be. So for instance, as I explained, this is going to return a number from 1 through 31. So it's putting that longitude all the way to the west. So I want to bring that value backwards to the east here, close to the US, so it aligns pretty nicely with my view. So I might do -120. And you see it starting to move around on the view. And I want to add a little bit on my latitude so that it also comes upwards, it comes north on the view. So I'm almost there, just adjust it a little bit more, and we're getting where we want it to be placed. And I think that's good enough for this example. So we have our data pieces here. I'm going to convert that to a line. Now I just have one single period, and that's because I'm not giving enough detail on what days those are that I want to use. So I'm going to pick up my timestamp, bring it into detail, and provide the day aggregation on it. So now we have our line chart here of averages through the month of October, as you can see from the tooltip. Two last things I wanted to cover with adjusting this line is the reason why it's so long right now is because my values range from 1 through 31 as results of my date part calculation. So it spans, once you get 31 minus 126 or 1 minus 126, the deviation there is very large. So one way to normalize it, let's say I could just divide this by 3. And now my numbers are not going to range that far as much, and I'm going to get a smaller line. So I'm happy with the result of that. We can add text to describe the line items through the marks card. I'm going to skip some of those pieces right now. But one additional thing I want to do is just add an if statement here, because I'm reporting these scores based on service outages. So I wanted to only return data associated for service outages. And I'll make this a little bit bigger. So it's the same logic, but only for service outages. And then if I hit apply, we should see this change as we expected it. So now we could potentially create another trend for each one of these reasons that get picked. I said I used an LOD. That was because I don't want to use a filter on the filter shelf, because if I want to display multiple categories, as I was saying, that filter should not apply across the board to everything. So that's why I was using an LOD, and I'll remove this from filter. But the same way we did this, we could do it for any of the other types of reasons or other metrics that we want to cover. And then the final aspect of this is just to add a little bit of interaction with this dashboard. I would like to hover over one of these states and modify the results for this chart here to show how one can talk to the other. To do that, I created a parameter which just lists all of my states. And I added another entry for none. So whenever you hover over something, I want it to pick whatever you're hovering on. And then once you remove that cursor from one of the states, for it to set it to none. We'll go and do a worksheet action to change the parameter value. And it's called list of states. I want to use my states column. It's going to be on hover. And then once you remove the hover, it's going to set this to none. So I think I went through that a little too quickly. Let me just open it again. So it's basic functionality. We're going to change the parameter behavior here on the right-hand side using the column called state. And once you hover out of it, it's going to set it to none. It's going to reset it, if you will. Now that we have that in place, I just need to change my line calculation in here to also include that statement. So it's either that and when my state equals the list of states, or when list of states equals none. So what this now says is I only want data for service outages. I want it if the state matches a specific, if the parameter matches a specific state that I have on my data set, return it for that one. If not, just return it for all. If none is the option, so the national score. And I'm not sure if I changed it to a hover or not. My apologies. Yep, it is a hover. So now as I hover over the states, my line should adapt to the state that is being selected. So just a very brief introduction of map layers. At this point, I now have 5 map layers, which is something you could have not done with the before 2020.4. This is my end product of what I was messing with here. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I would say north of 9 to 10 layers to get this result. So you could really take it one step further and start building actually dashboards from within a single sheet if you wanted to, by messing with map layers. And that's what I had, and I'll turn it to Jay with a full screen of Tableau that will make it a lot easier for others to see.
Thanks, Lucas. Okay. Screen. All right, thanks, Lucas. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to continue with not map layers in Tableau. Just kind of piggybacking off what Lucas already did. And just to recap on me, I'm the data visualization manager at Evolytics. I've been in Tableau 4 or 5 years. I have a certified desktop associate, and I'm also one of the Casey Tug co-leaders here in Kansas City. And in my spare time, I like to climb and yoga and mountain bike and stuff like that, anything outside. All right, so this is a presentation for Tableau developers. We're gonna go through the steps for adding not map layers, and then we'll cover some use cases. One of them is my use case that I use, and then 2 of them are just ones that I got from the community that I will just dive into and of course attribute to the creators. So the steps for not map layers are basically it's mark layers. That's actually what pops up when you bring it over. If you saw that when Lucas was doing his. Just to recap, we're going to create all our make point calculations, and Lucas just went over that. We're going to add those to the worksheet as mark layers. And then what we're going to do to unmap it is swap our rows and our columns to create a scatter plot. So take the longitude and latitude and reverse them on the rows and columns. And then from there, we're just going to format our marks going forward to kind of get the desired look that we want. So use case number 1. So this is mine that I had an idea for a couple months ago. And this was labeling a density plot. So the goal here was on a density plot, they wanted to label the average and the median profit for each category. So we needed 3 marks. We had a mark for our density plot, we had a mark for our average and a mark for our median. And so, you know, with a dual axis, this wasn't possible. You could do it with a reference line, but that looked kind of weird, right? It's not ideal. But with the mark layers, you know, we could do an up triangle and a down triangle pointing to the mark, the label that it was. And so our end result looks something like this, where we can have a segment, right? We have a density of the distribution. So you can see how that these products in these categories are distributed as far as the profit goes. And, you know, looking at this chart, we can see that most of our products are in the office supplies category, but our highest profit products are in the technology category. And the average is really high, but the median is actually kind of more towards the middle. So this gives you some good analysis, good insight on the profit distribution by product, by category. So the steps to do this were, we needed to create our make point calculated fields. And I'm going to run through this. I'm just going to outline what I'm going to go through. Create the make point calculated fields, one for average profit and one for median profit. Add the worksheet, add to the worksheet as mark layers, swap our rows and our columns to unmap it, and then add our category and then format. So we're actually going to use the average profit. We're going to have 3 layers here. We're going to use the average profit twice, once for our density and once for our mark. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we do here. So let's create our make point. So we need to add our average profit. So I'm just going to go through my other screen. So to create average profit, we're going to do a make point. We're going to put the average profit on basically you're making an X and a Y axis, right? That's what this is. So we're going to do average profit on the X axis. Our Y axis is going to be 0. That's all we're going to do is create that. And then we need a median profit as well. So same thing. The median profit is going to be on the X axis and our Y axis is going to be 0. So let's go ahead and add our average profit. I can double click it. Since it is a make point, then Tableau automatically makes a map with latitude and longitude and puts it on here for us. So let's add our median profit. And if we drag it over, then we get this add a marks layer, little hover menu. We can drop it on there, adds another layer for us. And then we're going to actually add another average because we need one for our density and one for our mark. So there we go. We have 3 now, and we can see that they're in Africa somewhere. But if we go ahead and transpose these, then we get no map anymore, right? Our latitude is on columns and our longitude is now on rows. So we can see where these points lie. I'm going to go ahead and add my segment. Is that what it is? Yeah. Segment here. Right? Is that what I was doing? Category, sorry. Segments next. Go ahead and add my category to give me my dimension. So there we go. Now we can see that I have my category and I can see where the average and the median are for each one of these. So I'm going to turn one of these into a density plot. And I'm going to do that based upon products. I need to change the level of detail to the product. So I'm going to do that on my first average profit. There we go. So now I get the average profit for every product. That's what the level of detail is at. And I'm going to change the mark type to a density. And then I'm going to change the color to this multicolor light. If any of you have ever messed around with density plots, you can't create your own color palettes as far as I know. I've tried and I don't think there's a way. So maybe hopefully there'll be a way someday, but you have to use these selections, which are all pretty good. Let's turn the intensity up a little bit and then turn the size up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we can see our density plot. We can see that the axes are latitude and longitude, right? And we can rename these. So I'm going to rename this to average profit density. So I know what it is. The density mark here. So now we get our median profit and our average profit. So these are as shapes, right? So I'm going to make the median profit down arrow and color it black. I think I actually need, yeah, so the order of these matters, right? So we want our density on bottom. So we actually want to put, yeah, the density on the bottom so that it's the bottommost layer. So the other marks stick up on top of it. I'm going to make this size a little bit bigger too. And let's do the same thing with our average profit. Change the shape to the up arrow. Color, make it black, and then change the size a little bit. There we go. And I can turn my labels on for each one of these. Actually, I need to do average profit. So to label it, I need to find my profit, bring it over, unlabel, and I'm going to do average. There we go. And then median profit, same thing. I'm gonna hold my option key so I get the nice little menu, median profit. And then just format these as I want. So I want the average one on top, right? So I'm gonna take my label it on top so it's above it. And I could continue formatting, right? Remove my grid lines, my zero lines, all that kind of stuff, make it bigger or smaller, however I want. But now I can see where, I have 3 mark layers on here: median profit, average profit, and average profit density. All right, so that was the use case I came up with. Seemed pretty practical. It's actually really simple. But now we're going to get into some very complicated use cases that I did not come up with. And these are just more to kind of push the boundaries of Tableau and get you thinking. So this one's courtesy of Samuel Parsons, and it is called a pie and line chart. So the goal here is to create, on one sheet, create pie and line charts for each region showing the percentage of sales for a selected segment with custom labels adjacent to each pie chart. So this is a chart type that you can't create unless you're using mark layers, right? You have this circle underneath this pie chart, and it like kind of overlays it, and you can adjust the sizes differently. And it's pretty cool. So I tried to make it not in mark layers, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's very similar, but it's just not quite there. So what we're doing here is we're using like the placeholder method, if you're familiar with that we use in tables, or to create even just not bullet charts, but donut charts in general. We have a placeholder, create a fake axis. So that's all we're doing here, is we're creating fake axes, one for the pie chart, the pie and line chart, and then one for the label. So we're actually going to put them right next to each other. One's going to be at 0, one's going to be at 2, and then we're going to split those by a segment, I believe, to kind of give us 4. All right, so same thing. We're going to make a mark at 0 and a mark at 2, and we'll turn one into a circle and one into a label. So we're just using placeholders, but with make points instead. So for this, what we're going to do is create make point calcs for the mark locations. So 0 and 2. We're going to create a parameter for the calculated fields. There's a little bit added functionality here where we can use a parameter to select the segment and the percent of total. We're going to add 3 mark layers to the worksheet, 2 for the 0 point, so the circle and the pie that are going to be on top of each other, and then 1 for the 2 point, which will be the labels next to each one. We will then transpose the rows and columns to unmap it, add the region to the column shelf to split it out by region. Sorry, that's what we're going to split it out by, not segment. And then we'll format it. All right, so let's go into this. So this pie and line, this is what the end result is going to look like. So let's do this. So we need our 1 and our 2, or 2 and our 0. So let's just look what these look like. So again, I brought these up earlier in PowerPoint. We're going to make point. We're going to do 2, 0, and 0, 0. So let's just go ahead and put these on. So when you double click that, it puts it in a collect function, which then plots it. So we have our 0. So let's put our 2 out, put it on mark layers. So we have our 2 points that we're going to use. And then actually we need 3, right? We need 2 zeros, 1 for each label. Okay. All right, so let's swap our rows and our columns. There we go. And now we can see that the latitude and longitude are now just kind of like axes anymore. We're not using a map. And so we get a point at 0. We actually get 2 marks at 0 and 1 mark at 2. And so the next step is going to be to kind of format these. So you can rename them like I did here. So one's the labels, one's the inner line, and one's the inner pie. So our labels is actually going to be the 2, So let's move the 2 to the top. Rename this labels so I know what it is. Click 0 right there. And then I created these other fields to kind of give us this. So these are both going to be, one's going to be a circle and one's going to be a pie. So let's make sure we know what they are. Circle. All right, so a circle is going to be, we're going to like basically manually dictate the size of this, right? It's just going to be a circle, and we're going to put, I made some calculated fields here. So there's a parameter that we're going to use to, I made this parameter. So it's going to pick what segment we're looking at. And we're trying to see the percent of total sales for all segments by the selected segment. And so we make a calculated field for the selected sales. So if the selected segment, sorry, I need to make that field first. If the selected segment, so if the segment equals the segment selector, which is this over here, right? Then we're going to return selected. Otherwise, we're going to turn others. So we're just making like a this versus that. If it's in or out, it's kind of like a set, in or out, selected or others. And then we make our sales fields based upon that. So if the sales are in the selected segment or if the sales are in the others. So let's put sales, others, and selected percent. I made a percentage as well in here. So there we go. Oh, that's on our labels. Oops. So you just come over here where our label's at, right? This is our 2 mark. So it shows up over here. Let's look at our circle. So our circle and then our pie. So our pie is going to be a little bit more complicated, right? It's going to be, we're going to use the sum of sales as the angle and the selected segment as the color. So let's do. Make this a pie. All right, we need to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. I want that first, right? And let's add our region. We're going to add it on the columns. So it goes left to right. Yeah, there we go. Let's pick a different segment. There we go. Corporate looks, the home office. Should be selected sales, right? Okay. Laundry's done. All right, so you can kind of see where this is going, right? We have our pie chart and we have it on top of our line chart, and we can adjust the size of this circle, this inner line, basically until we want, like, get the effect that we want. We want it kind of like in the middle, I don't know, right there-ish. Let's do that. So you kind of see this is going. We have a circle, and then we have a pie chart on top of it, and then we have our labels next to it. These are our labels right here. So this is what it's doing, right? We have a 0 and a 2, these marks. Just doing that. And this is what I tried to make using just a regular kind of pie chart. So I have my placeholders here, my min zeros to create a 0 axis split by region. And you get this circle. But you always have, like, you know, the border. If you want a border on this one, on this pie chart, I guess you can do this. No, because it's the whole thing. It's opaque. Yeah, so you can't get that overlay on it because it's 2 different shapes. The color's always down. Yeah, so you can get close, but you can't quite get there. So there we go. The rest is just formatting. So I'm not going to go too deep into that. But again, the concept to grasp here is the points that you're creating, right? The 0 and the 2, one's the label, one's your chart. All right, so let's go into use case number 3. So this is Adam McCann. So he's a Tableau Zen master, and he posted some crazy stuff on map layers. So the goal here is on one sheet, he created all these 6 KPIs that have their own line charts within them and their own indicators and stuff like that. So this is pretty intense, and it uses what Lucas just used with the kind of trying to place your lines with the coordinates. It's making coordinates, right? And you have to manually adjust them so that the line charts go underneath the KPIs that you want them to go under. So what he did here was he used basically a grid. And so we have like spots for 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, right? It's like a XY coordinates, and you're just making points for each one of those as like your placeholders. So that's what this is. So profit, notice profit is 2, 2. So profit is right here, right? It's 2 over and 2 up. So that's where that is. So and you have to filter, he filtered by a parameter for the year. And then to make point 2, 2. So that gives him his placeholder there. But then to get the line chart over there, he used, sum of profit, and then used the month of order date as the granularity for the line chart. But then he had to, divide by 24 to kind of normalize it. Well, Lucas was just talking about it. And then he added, 1.73 to get it up in the y-axis, and he added 1.72 to get it over in the x-axis. So each one of his is a little bit different. And I think it was, if you listen to his webinar, it was just a lot of trial and error that he had to do. And I think Lucas is probably the same thing for you. Trial and error on all these. So this is what the sheet looks like. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's a weird number, 13. 13 marks on it. Maybe I miscounted. A lot of marks, right? So each one of these has its own, like I said, and then there's a line chart, and he has an indicator in here. So pretty complex. He's got some parameters as well. He's got targets. He's coloring the lines based upon if it's going up or going down. So what he says about this is that the advantages are with putting things in places, you have the ability to dynamically sort or show hide the KPIs, i.e. based on percentage change. Maybe you only want to show KPIs that are going up or going down, right? You can dynamically show those by putting a make point, using your make point calculation, and they will actually get bigger and smaller based upon your view. You also have the ability to zoom in or zoom out, which is another concept that Adam McCann kind of came up with, where he uses a parameter, you click on a chart, and it makes all the other make points go to null. And so that one kind of comes to full screen, and there's another parameter to reset that, so it kind of goes back, and the other ones come back out. It looks really cool. It's kind of complex, a lot of work on the back end, but it's possible if that's what you want to do. And another advantage is that it just makes you better at Tableau to kind of do these kinds of things and experiment them. You understand the tool better. You understand how all these features interact with each other, which is really the power of Tableau, in my opinion. And so yeah, it just makes you better. But disadvantages, it's not terribly practical, even if you need the advantages that I just talked about. It's a lot of work, and you can get the same effect with multiple sheets, and it's more scalable probably. And if somebody has to come edit your workbook, it will be a lot easier on them, right? So again, the layering steps for not map layers are create your make point calculations, add to the worksheets as marked layers, swap your rows and your columns to create the scatter plot. The latitude and longitude will switch, and then just go ahead and format your marks to get it how you want it to look. So check out the chat and any questions. And then as always, you can find a lot of tutorials on our blog site, analytics.com/blog. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that was really great. We didn't have any questions come in through the Q&A or in the chat, but if you have any, go ahead and shoot them over, and Jay will take a look. That was really awesome. One thing that I think map layers, even before map layers was a thing, kind of what people kind of what Tableau was all about. What its bread and butter was being able to draw with data, right? And I think map layers just takes it one step further. And you can now literally do anything if you kind of figure out how to make your coordinates go to wherever you want. I'm ready for what I'm ready for is I'm ready for mark layers, as you mentioned. Like I'm ready for layers on all types of marks. So I don't want to have to hack to make a line chart. I just want to make a line chart and I just want to add mark layers to it. So I think that's a feature that's coming, but who knows? We'll see. All right. Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Lucas. That was great. We're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about how to manage your Tableau server a little bit more efficiently with Jeff James. So, Jeff, take it away.
Right. Thanks, Sean. Let me get my screen up here. And there we go. Is that showing now?
Yep.
All right. So anyway, I'm Jeff James. I'm a director of product management at Cerner, and my primary area of responsibility is our business intelligence infrastructure. And I manage business intelligence center of excellence, where Sean is one of the guys on my team, and I get to focus more on the back end stuff because I got people like Sean working for me who take care of all of the visualization creation and all of that sort of stuff. So today we're going to talk about webhooks, which is something that Tableau released a couple of versions ago that we're taking advantage of a little bit, but not a huge amount yet. So anyway, I want to just kind of an example of a problem that you might need to solve, and definitely one that we need to solve. You got an organization, you've got various people who are taking on call rotations for support and operations. Are things working? Are they not working? Who's going to get called out? All of those sorts of things. You don't necessarily want to send a message to everybody on the team when only certain people need to get notified for that period of time. So it can get pretty complex or messy or other things. And, so how do you do things like that? So historically, there's a couple of approaches that might be used. Like, for one thing, it's just have a system that's constantly pinging, right? It's always hitting the system. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? If you've ever traveled with children, you can know that this gets pretty annoying. There's lots of traffic, there's lots of activity, it takes a fair amount of coding, and it's very inefficient because if it's constantly hitting the server, then the server is spending more time trying to figure out whether to tell the other messaging system that something's happened than it's spending trying to figure out what it actually should be doing. So it works, but it's not a great solution to the problem. So another approach is just checking periodically. And the problem with that is if I only check once an hour or once a day or whatever, then the problem may be long gone, or the system is sitting in a broken state for a longer period of time than necessary. So that's not a great answer. I mean, if you're not terribly time sensitive, it works. It's relatively easy coding problem, but it doesn't really probably give you what you want. The other approach that is relatively common is to have the originating system, so your operational system, send a message outbound when something happens, and then have the system that's doing the notification be the listening system rather than the polling system going in there and constantly asking about things. The problem with doing that is you have to figure out what the method of communication is, and you don't always have something on the operational system. So, I mean, there's different ways that that could go out. You could do a named pipe, which is kind of an old way of connecting two systems. You could use email, you could use SMS, lots of different systems that you can do it. But this is clearly the most efficient way of approaching things, because you're not constantly asking for something or periodically asking. The originating system just send a message out when something's happened. And in this case, that's what we're going to be talking about. So Tableau added those things as a standard, right? I mean, standards are great because there's always libraries that you can deal with, but problems with some of the standard, right? So email, it's okay. It's not immediate. People may not be checking it. There's limitations in what you can send out securely, depending on whether you're crossing email system boundaries. Another option that's coming inside of Tableau is to send stuff to Slack. And actually, that's a great answer if you use Slack as your standard for immediate communications. Our company doesn't, so Slack isn't a great answer for us. Now, since Salesforce purchased Slack, I'm sure we're going to see a lot more integration with Tableau and Slack and MuleSoft and the other Salesforce pieces of software. So we'll see how that all ends up working out. But again, like I said, not everybody uses Slack. So Tableau also provides webhooks, which is really a great idea because it is a standard, not something that you're going to have to come up with your own mechanism for dealing with. Now, one thing before I go too much further about this, webhooks is just, it's a communication mechanism, right? So it sends a message outbound. You still have to have something that's going to deal with that on the receiving end. And we'll talk about that and show a little bit towards the end. So what actually are webhooks is probably a pretty good question. Wikipedia says that it's a method of augmenting or altering behavior of a web page or web application with custom callbacks. All right, so not terribly descriptive. Well, actually it is descriptive, but it's not terribly illuminating. Let's put it that way. Zapier has a little bit better discussion. It's webhooks are automated messages sending from a web app when something happens. Key to this is they have a unique message, technically a payload, that's sent to a unique URL, which is the listening system, which essentially is, think of it as a contact for the receiving system. So that probably makes a little bit more sense in terms of what's going on. But the whole idea of this is it's standards-based, uses REST APIs, uses JSON, uses HTTP as the transport mechanism. So a lot of things that you're dealing with on a regular basis when you're coding in the web world. So the basic flow, some sort of event happens inside of the Tableau server that goes through and it sends it to its sending process. And that webhook sending process says, oh, okay, it's coming up. This thing happened. I have a webhook for this. the destination address for that webhook message is this URL. So I'm going to send this JSON payload out to the listening system. The listening system gets the message, and based on the contents of that message, it knows that it has something to do. So that means that because each sending system is sending a unique JSON payload, your listener doesn't have to be uniquely coded to deal with a message from that one specific sending system. So you can build a more generalized system that looks at the JSON that's sent to it and then decides what to do downstream from there. So if you have multiple applications that need to send information out, you can build one listener, and then the logic for processing things can be done after the fact. So inside of Tableau, there's a number of different events that can trigger a Tableau webhook. Really kind of comes down to, you've got a set of workbook items that can be worked with and a set of data source items. And it's really about flow, right? These are all of the things that are happening inside the system. So anytime a workbook is created or it's updated, it's deleted, a refresh starts, succeeds, fails, a view is deleted from a workbook, and then the same sorts of things that happen on data sources, whether the data source is created, when it's updated, deleted, and refreshes. Now, when you create a webhook, it's associated with one of these events. So if you wanted to have something that went in and looked at each one of these items, you would have a separate webhook, which would then send the message out on each of those things, which is really not a big deal. It's actually a relatively simple process on the Tableau side. There's no UI for it, so it's all with the REST API. But it's relatively straightforward to create those things and then list what they are, and then interact with them and send the information out. So what do you need to do if this ends up being something that is of interest for your organization? On the Tableau side, there's a whole set of instructions on how to deal with it. And Tableau has actually made it as user-friendly as you kind of can when it comes to dealing with REST APIs. They use Postman, and they provided a Postman collection. And I don't know if any of you regularly deal with REST APIs, but Postman is a semi-standard process. Lots of people use Postman. I have the Tableau collection for it, and I also have some of my own that I've created to do things like add a user or update a user's password, some things that can be done with the UI, but can also be automated a little bit. And we use Postman to validate what we're doing with our code to make sure that all of those processes work properly. You can also use curl, and a lot of times actually what you'll see in the Tableau help is you'll actually see the curl commands that you would use to do it, because it's all just command line stuff. So it's easier to put the curl commands in the Tableau help than it is to do Postman, which has a whole UI and those things. So Curl is great, and if you're used to working on the command line, curl will work just fine. So either way that you decide to do that, those are two great ways to handle it. On the receiving side, kind of pretty much totally up to you how you want to code that stuff. For us, we use Teams because we've standardized on Teams and generally the Microsoft Office 365 suite in general. So Teams just fits in with what we're doing. And I have a whole long blog post on how to create webhooks and connect them to Teams out on my GitHub. So that goes through the whole process, and that in and of itself is probably a 30 or 40-minute presentation. So I'm not going to go through that today, but it's out there if you want to look at it for Teams specifically. If you want to use other tools, there's Zapier, which I talked about earlier. There's IFTTT, which is if then, if that, or if this then that. I always get their name screwed up, but anyway, IFTTT. And you can use Slack, and Slack gives you your ability to use webhooks, as well as now Tableau is going to be building some of their own capabilities, but essentially they're using webhooks behind the scenes for that. So now, what could you end up doing with webhooks? Whatever you'd like it to do, right? So, I mean, you could use webhooks to send an email, but I'd say if email is what you wanted, there's less complicated ways to do that. Tableau has email capability built into many of those events already. But like we said, emails are a little bit of a blunt instrument in terms of where they're going to go and how frequently people are going to check them and lag in getting notification. So that's where Teams, Slack, a different system like that might be a better way to go. You could also send an SMS message. Depending on what your system is, you could write something that logged a ServiceNow ticket or whatever your ticketing system is. If something broke, you could write a process that restarted that process. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that unless you know that it broke, but the next time you ran it, it ran well, because otherwise you just get into a loop, and that wouldn't be a great plan either. Other things that you can do, right? I mean, you could have it turn on your living room lights. I don't know why you'd want to, but that's the sort of thing that IFTTT can do. I use it for IFTTT in my smart home to link moisture sensors to send SMS messages to everybody in the family's phones, so that they know we have yet another leak in the basement, which has been an unfortunate and ongoing battle with our current house. I hope I have that solved now, but I still have processes set up to notify everybody immediately when moisture is detected down in the basement. So a more realistic thing, perhaps, than turning on your living room lights or whatever, is just sending a message and saying, hey, this workbook refresh started for this workbook at this time, and it shows up. We have this set up for some of our clients, not all of them. We've got hundreds of clients and thousands of workbooks. It becomes a challenge to try and keep that, the notifications, even targeted notifications to a more reasonable level. And so we really in production only monitor failures. We don't look at anything beyond that because the volume of traffic would just be way too big if we looked at every refresh that was started and every refresh that finished and every time something was published. It would just be noise. So at this point, we've targeted down to just looking at failures and just looking at them for some targeted clients. All right, I'm going to go start a quick demo here. So I'm going to have to cut down screen sharing for a second and swap over, and we'll hopefully see some here in a sec.
Hey, Jeff, while you're doing that, we had a question come in talking about were there any authentication hurdles you had to overcome in order to connect to Teams?
No, yes and no. Teams doesn't require authentication for listening, but you have to have Power Automate to do it. So Teams itself is not how we do it. We send it from the webhook to Power Automate, and then Power Automate goes and it is what actually sends the message to Teams.
Got it.
All right. Let's see here. All right, you see that screen now?
No, we don't see anything quite yet.
Ah,
There we go.
how about now? All right.
Yep.
So over here, you can see I've got the schedule, and it's showing what happens there. And where did it go? No. And then over here, I've got a system, and you can see this is where I'm sending the information to. So if I come over here, I choose Run Now, it goes back into the queue, and this runs pretty quickly. And there we go. I've got a message in Teams that told me that I had a refresh start going inside of the system. And I've just, for this demo, I've got just the start, but it could show me that it finished. It could show me that it failed, all of those things. It could show me publishes. So it's pretty straightforward process once you actually have it in place. And like I say, that the work associated with getting everything aligned and set up inside of Power Automate is relatively complicated, but I've got the let's see here. All of the information on how to create it using Postman and Power Automate. So everything, including screenshots and the whole deal, out there on that site. So it's not terribly complicated, but it's a little bit fiddly to get going with that once you do it. And then also, this is Postman that I talked about earlier that I tend to use. And these are the various requests in the JSON format that Tableau includes to make that work relatively easy and efficiently. So anyway, that's pretty much what webhooks are, how they work, and they really are a pretty powerful way to build a messaging system that works the way you want it to, rather than relying on what they've coded and how somebody else wants it to work. Yeah.
Nice.
That's it. Any other questions?
No, just had a couple of people say that they were excited. Looks like we've got a
Yeah,
couple.
it's cool stuff. And then they say it requires, if you have Power Automate, it doesn't require like full-on coding, but it's close to coding. But of course, if you start looking at how complicated using map layers and stuff are, you're damn near cold coding stuff from scratch when you're doing workbooks like that anyway.
Yeah.
So
is Postman update is Postman open source? I believe it is, right? It doesn't require a purchase.
It's freely available. I'm not sure whether I've never looked into it as far as open source, but it's freely accessible and freely usable.
All right, and then we've got our last question. Can it be used for KPIs? Not sure exactly what that.
No, the only events that it can cover, at least today, are these. But they're trying to figure out if there are other event type things. And well, let's think about this. So it wouldn't do the KPI itself, but if you knew that a KPI was going to be of interest when a data source refresh succeeded, you could then send a message out that said, hey, this refresh succeeded, and you could then use that to trigger something which used other portions of the REST API that can be used to trigger schedules and things like that. So you could trigger a schedule, or you could trigger a subscription based on one of these things succeeding. So rather than being a data-driven alert that said it reached some value or a specific time-based alert, you could have something that said, hey, this data source refresh succeeded, so send it out now. So it's sort of time-based, but it's not based on a hard time, rather, or based on a specific change in a specific value, like a KPI turned red for some reason or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Be interesting to see if there'd be, just thinking if there's a way that you could write something that could, though they could go into that data source and do some sort of an ask data type of question that would then, do something along those lines. But either way, that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, that's how, because we have problems with subscriptions today, because they always send thumbnails, and thumbnails can contain privacy related data. So we've got subscriptions disabled. That's sort of the process that I built to do our own sort of data-driven alerts for monitoring the COVID dashboard that we get notified every morning and things like that.
Yep. Cool. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
All right, thanks.
And just for everybody else on the call, if that was interesting to you, or if there are things in Jeff's presentation that were interesting to you, I wanted to mention that Jeff is also the leader of the embedded Tableau user group. So they meet quarterly, and so you can definitely go check that out in the community. And they talk about it's much more on the not much more. There's a lot of that technical side about how to do embedding of Tableau into your environment and organization. So check that out if you would like. All right. So the next and last thing that we're going to get to real quick is we're going to talk about Workout Wednesday. So Workout Wednesday is a really fun community project. It is long and well documented. It started back in 2017 with Emma White and some guy named Andy Kriebel, who basically did started a weekly challenge. Basically, you're given the data. You're given a screenshot of what you need to reproduce, and you're given the requirements with which to reproduce it. And then it's your job to basically use Tableau and your existing knowledge or your research capabilities and go recreate it as best you can. It's a really great learning exercise to go do that. Do I have, yeah, you can see my screen, right? All right, just making sure. So anyway, this is our website, workout-wednesday.com. What's that?
I was responding that we can see it.
Great. All right. So this is workout-wednesday.com. This has got 4 years of data, 4 years of challenges, 4.5, I should say. We just started our 5th year. And we also just added a Power BI arm to it. So there are now Power BI challenges for this year. So if you're learning a new tool, you can go check that out as well. But since this is a Tableau user group, we're going to stick to Tableau today. So the challenge that we're going to walk through together uses Superstore data. So you don't have to worry too much about making sure that values match or having to download the data or anything. But we're going to reach back into the bag, and we're going to go all the way back to 2017. And I think this is week 27 or something like that. And we're going to build a 4-box. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a dynamic 4-box scatter plot, and we're going to color each quadrant depending on which quadrant they're in. And we're going to add some filters, and we're going to add some, we're going to be able to change the dot, what each circle represents. We're going to change the level of detail. So a lot of really good stuff in here. We're going to learn about table calculations. So if those are nervous or scaring to you, I'm going to show you how they're not. And we're going to really do some really cool tooltip formatting as well. So you can see in here the color of the tooltip changes depending on which quadrant you're in. So let's jump into Tableau and let's go ahead and get started here. You can just open up Tableau Superstore if you want to follow along. Doesn't really matter which version you use, because we're not really concerned about the values. We're just learning about the concepts for this one. So first one, we're just going to create a very simple scatter plot. I'm going to take sales. I'm going to drop it on rows. I'm going to take my average discount. I'm going to drop it on columns. I get a nice one circle scatter plot. I'm going to change that to a circle because it defaults to a shape. So we're just going to change that to a circle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that parameter that allows us to change the level of detail. And it's going to be a string, or it's actually going to be an integer, and I'll tell you why I do these types of things. So I'm just going to label each one of these 1, 2, 3. But I'm going to change these. Like the first one was customer. And let's see, what do we have? Customer, product, and zip code. So we've got product and zip code. Now you may be wondering, why did you not just call it, why did you not have your values match what your display is? Well, the reason I like to do this is because it makes it very easy to add additional things into your parameter and then into your calculations later. And you'll see why as we start building out this calculation. So there's my 3 values, and now I'm going to create a calculated field, and we're going to say this is the level of detail, and it's going to be a case statement for my parameter, which I creatively called it parameter 4. So when 1, then, and I'm just going to put in my actual customer name field. Customer name, when 2, then product, when 3, then postal code. And I'll end that case statement. So here's why I really like to do this. So let's say you are rolling with this dashboard or rolling with this and everything is good. And I think I probably need to change this to a string because it's not happy right now. Yeah. And so what'll happen is, let's say you're rolling with this and like, well, this is great, but could you add state to this? You're like, yeah, I could do that. And you just add a new integer for your value, and you just add state. And so it just cuts down your keystrokes later on, which I'm all about. So I changed that to a string. And now I need to wrap each of my values in quotes. Just like that. It's still mad at me. The reason why it's still mad at me is because postal code is coming in as an integer. And customer name and product name are both string fields. So what I actually need to do is I need to wrap my postal code. I need to convert that into a string field. Now you can see Tableau's happy. All right, I click OK. Now I'm going to take my first one I'm going to do. I'll rename this. I'll say this is dot represents. And now it'll show my parameter. And here's a fun thing. If you're new to Tableau, did you know that you can change the layout of your canvas? I don't like how my parameters and filters always go over here. I like to have everything kind of over on this side. So I like to change that. So now what I need to do is I need to take my level of detail calculation that I just created, drop that onto detail. And then what we can do is we can just make sure that this works by selecting our parameter, and it does, which is great. All right, so I'll leave it out there. What's going on here? Got a lot of heavy profit, or heavy discounted right there. All right, so the next thing, I think I'm just going to go ahead and exclude these outliers just for the sake of what it looks like later. There we go. All right, so now what I need to do, if we look at this picture, we've got these reference lines. So let's go ahead and add those reference lines. There's a couple different ways you can do that. One, you can right click on your axis and add reference line. Sum of sales, I want the average. I want the value here. And I want it to be a dashed line, and I want it to be really black. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. I don't like it there. I like it there. Okay. I'm going to uncheck show recalculated, just like that. And now I've got that average line right there. Next thing I'm going to do is add my other. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to do average line. I drag it on here. You can do it for either the entire table or just an individual axis. I'm going to drop this on average discount because I already did one for sales. I'm going to go ahead and in here to edit because I want it to be the exact same thing. I want it to be the value. I want it to be dashed and I want it to be super black. There we go. Just like that. Do some other formatting while I'm here. Right click format on your reference line. You'll get your format menu over here on the left. I want my alignment. I want this one to be on the top. I also want this to be super black so we can see it. Maybe change it to Tableau medium. Also do the same thing over here. Tableau medium. And the alignment, I want it to be on the left. There we go. All right. So we can see that our averages change depending on where you're at. Now, next thing we need to do is we need to start creating. We need to start figuring out the tough part, which is how to color each coordinate. This is where table calculations are going to come in. All right, so we're going to do, this is the discount compare. What we're going to do is we're going to translate these average lines. This is what we need to do. We need to be able to translate these average lines into a Tableau function. If there's one thing that you're going to learn today, it's going to be how to translate reference lines into Tableau calculations. So, did you know reference lines are nothing more than window functions? Check this out. Sum of sales. That's your pill. That's the pill that you're using right here. Then you have this drop down. This is your window function. So window sum, window min, window max, window average, window median. So if I want to translate this into a calculated field, it's window average of sum of sales. And then what I need to do is, I'm going to say, if sum of sales is greater than or equal to the window average of sum of sales, then return high, else low. End. And there we go. Got to spell right. Let me bump that up again. So let me bring this. So what we're saying is if the sum of sales is the pill, that's what the measure is on each one of these dots, is greater than or equal to the window average of the sum of sales, which is what this reference line refers to, then return high or low. So everything here is going to be high, everything down here is going to be low. Now what I need to do, I like to go ahead and create, I like to set how I want my table calculations to calculate so that I don't have to do it later. So I'm going to go in here and it's going to compute using automatic. And I'm just going to go ahead and I want it to hard code it to compute using the level of detail field. Click OK. Then what I need to do is I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm going to edit this. And I'm just going to change the pill and the aggregation in here. So this is now the average discount. This is the average discount. Now, some of you might be saying, well, aren't you taking an average of an average? Yeah, I am. It's just the way you got to do it sometimes. Let's see. So now I'm just gonna, this is not a discount, or is, yeah, I misnamed my fields. So this is actually going to be, I'll do that. I'll change, let's see, if sum of sales. So this is sales compare. There we go. All right. So now what I need to do, so now if I drag this out onto color, you can see I've got discount sales based on each one. Likewise, if I take sales compare and drag it right on top, so I've validated that these calculations are working. Now what I need to do is I need to combine those calculations together. So simply put, that is just, I'm going to call this sales over discount. And I'm just going to concatenate these two together. So this is sales compare plus discount compare. Okay, add an extra plus. There we go. Tableau's happy. I have a new calculated field. I'm going to drag that onto color. And boom, we've got that. So now I have each quadrant colored. And this is, again, this was a really kind of a light bulb moment when I first figured this out. And I said, I have to tell as many people about this as possible every chance I get. Everything over here in your analytics pane, pretty much, not every, but several of them, they're just window functions. They're just table calculations. So if you can learn how to create, how to translate these into Tableau functions, then you can start using these types of things in other types of analyses. So this was a huge moment in my learning of Tableau. So if you haven't had that realization yet, hopefully you are now, and you're ready to tell everybody about it. So the next thing I need to do is we need to do that. Let's figure out the color coding for this. So you can see here it says high sales, low discount, and then it changes, right? So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to go back into here, and I'm going to change what the text returns to. So I'm just going to say high, this is discount, so high discount. Discount. I'm going to change this to sales. High sales. Okay. All right, so now what I need to do, this is going to be high sales. And it's just going to be if my, let's see, this is if my sales over discount field equals high sales, high discount, then just going to copy this text. And then just end that, where if it's not this, don't give me anything. If it is, just return this text field. So this is high. You can probably come up with something a little bit more creative. But now I'm just going to duplicate this 3 more times. And now I'm just going to say, this is high, low. That. This is going to be low, high. And then this last one is going to be low, low. So I've just created 4 fields that only return whichever quadrant they're in. I needed them combined whenever I put my color on there, but for my text, I need them separate. So it's a little bit, you got to go the extra mile to get the good stuff, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 4 fields that I just created, and I'm just going to drop those onto my tooltip, just like that. And now we can validate this before we go further to make sure this is working right. So we've got, if we look at this, we've got, this is the color, sales over discount, but it's in the high low category. So only the high low category is complete. Each of the other quadrants, each of the other return fields are null. So that's working exactly as I want it to. Okay. So now I can come in here and we can say, look, not there. Nope. There it is. We can say, okay, so this is going to say, let's try and translate this into Tableau talk, right? So this is level of detail is a return color, level of detail parameter name with an average discount of that and a total sales of that. All right, so let's go back here. Let's get rid of all this. Oh, that's a reset. There we go. All right, so first thing we do is the level of detail. That's the return name, right? So that's going to be the actual customer name. So customer name is a, and this is where we stack, we're just going to stack all of these together. High, low, high, high, low, high, and low, low. We just stack them all right next to each other. And then we can just format them the way that we need to. And we just use our little color picker here, blue's there. This is, I didn't pay attention. This is high, low. It's orange. Not sure what that changed, but oh yeah. High, low is right there. Low, high. Here. Red. And of course, you could change your colors if you wanted to make it more, maybe you want your low, low to be this way, or you could say, I only want to look at my really highs or my really lows, or you could do it however you wanted to. And then the last one, the low, low, is going to be this kind of teal color here. There we go. And then we said we need to actually put in the actual text that is. Oh, I don't want that. I want this. There we go. Is a blank with an average discount of, and that's where we put in our fields, average discount, and a total sales of sum of sales. All right, let's always remember, if you're putting this worksheet in a dashboard, always uncheck include command buttons, because that's what allows you to exclude or keep only, but it's only for that worksheet. And if you've probably run into this a few times, It's just kind of silly. So always remove include command buttons. Always uncheck that. We'll uncheck selection by category as well. All right, so now let's check. Yep, look at that. And we've got our color changing just like that. Everything is working the way that we want it to. The last thing that we need to do, we need to add in a region filter, and then we need an updating, probably gonna reset, there we go. We need a dynamic title. So that should be pretty easy. We'll go in here and we will add region. You don't even have, did you know you don't even have to add it to the filter card? You can just right click on it and just do show filter, and that automatically does it. That's a fun one. And then for the title, we'll double click on the title and we'll say, what is it? How does discounting impact sales by dot represents? How does discounting impact sales by customer? And we can just check to double check to make sure. Product, zip code, and then we can, there we go. And everything is updating the way that it should. So there you go. So hopefully you learned a few things. Again, the big thing I wanted you to learn, again, we'll just one more time. This is the pill that you have on your shelf or in the marks. This right here, these are your window functions. These are your Tableau table calculations. So total, window sum, window min, window max, window average, window median. So once you learn that, then you can use that to you can use that in other calculations and other sheets. You're not just limited to using this value on this sheet as a reference line. So really cool stuff. Cool. All right. So with that, I wonder if we have any questions. Ah, Lucas, are you still there?
I am, Sean.
All right, we've got a question about maps that came in. Wondering if map layers will make it any easier to add a fill or cross-hatching in a county map. So basically right now we only have filled, or I don't know if cross-hatching, I don't know if that will, I don't think that will be something that map layers will help with. Do you know? Top of your head? Off the top of your head?
No, I think I'm with you on that one. I do recall a viz from Adam as well, where he kind of plotted a picture of his house, pixel by pixel.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't say that makes it easier necessarily.
Yeah.
Makes it doable, but easier is a different story, because you would need long coordinates for each one of the little dots to try to accomplish that feel. So
Yeah.
I would stick with the no for now, but
Yeah.
definitely something to look into.
Yep. Cool. All right. Looks like we got some good comments about this challenge. So yeah, dynamic titles. Dynamic titles are awesome. You can do a lot with them. So definitely start using those. And so as we wrap up here, not going to keep you much longer, but I did want to announce the next, you guys are privy to excellent, good stuff. The next Kansas City Tableau user group meeting has already been scheduled, and it is going to be on May 18th at 2 p.m. So go ahead and save your calendar. You can actually go to this website right now and RSVP. You're going to want to come to it because we're very excited to welcome Tableau Zen Master Hall of Famer Steve Wexler is going to come and do a little presentation on all of his wonderful knowledge that he's gathered over the past several years with how to make faster and better data visualizations. So definitely come check us out next month, next May. It's going to be a good time. We might do another one of these workout Wednesday lives. We might do some trivia. Who knows? But it's going to be a good time. So with that, I want to thank Jeff again for talking to us about webhooks, and Jay and Lucas for talking about some of their knowledge about map layers and how you can use it. Jay or Lucas, any final words or comments?
No, I would just say, just like with any other functionality in Tableau, it is a great tool if you know how to use all of the out of the box. But once you start seeing out in the community how people wouldn't say hack it, but go the extra mile and understanding what's happening behind the scenes, it just enables you to do a lot more, which is what hopefully we were able to demonstrate with the map layers / not map layers presentation today, or with you, Sean, in the table calculations there and how to reverse engineer those. So just keep an eye out on the community, check LinkedIn, the DataFam hashtag for examples, because it's just incredible how much you can get from new insights and things you didn't know was possible just because you were kind of limited to the out of the box feature.
That's right.
So
cool. All right, Kansas City. We will talk to you next month. Go forth and viz.